A few years ago, during the reckoning with racism movements, like the heyday of that movement in 2020 and 2021, occasionally on Saturdays, I would go downtown and help clean up in the mornings. This was with a group called Trash Panda PDX, which is a lovely reference to to Guardians of the Galaxy 2, when they refer to Rocket, who looks like a raccoon, as a trash panda. So you gotta love that. And I really appreciated having this way of like contributing, especially when so many folks were vilifying the moment, like, oh, look what a mess they're making, and like there are a lot of us who are trying to pitch in, trying to help, support by cleaning up. It's not glamorous, but it's necessary. My first time, I was surprised to see that even some of our folks who sleep outside downtown contributed with Trash Panda PDX too. That didn't fit my mind's eye. Like, wait, what? You're unhoused. You're not supposed to want to clean? I was wrong. And what a wonderful teaching moment it was for me. One Saturday, I was not there for this. This was either the last time Trash Panda PDX met or close to the end of their time. A bunch of far-right agitators came. They wanted to come early to brawl with protesters. So this is your Proud Boys, your Patriot Prayer, and the like. And they started hassling the folks who were cleaning, and they started hassling the handful of protesters who were there. Some of those very same unhoused neighbors stood up. They were speaking out against these men with their body armor and their guns, and got beat up. It's a scary thing to confront the evils of our day. There is risk, great risk. We know that, we feel that. In today's story, we have the third miracle in the book of John, the third sign, as John likes to call them. Every sign is always like a teaching moment. Well, I shouldn't say every. There's one or two where he's like, well, Jesus did this thing. It was cool. Anyway, this happened shortly after one of these Jesus did a cool thing, but it has kind of a teaching component that comes after it. But it starts off, Jesus makes a trip over to Jerusalem. There's a festival happening, and he comes across this pool. This pool which is fed flowing water, living water. John loves his layers of meaning in his stories, right? Last week we were talking about living water, and now he's like, well, this is literally it's flowing water, water of life. And in this pool were many folks who were seeking healing. They were sick, or they had a disability of some kind. We have to remember this is not a society that made very many accommodations for people with disabilities. And Jesus sees this man laying next to this pool of healing. Our writer tells us he's been struggling for 38 years. We're not told what he's sick with, but whatever it is, it's lasted 38 years, and he is here because he wants to get well, we may assume. But Jesus asks him, hey, do you want to get well? Do you want to heal? And the man says, how can I? Everybody keeps cutting in front of me, and I try to put myself in there. I need somebody to put me in the water. Jesus says, well, pick up your mat and walk. And the man does so. What a wonderful story. Amazing, right? Except it's the Sabbath day. And he's carrying his mat. And he comes across this group. Many of our commentators say that when John is referring to a group called the Jews, he He's likely speaking about the Jewish religious authorities. These are certainly folks who are taking hardline stances on interpreting the law. And I believe that to be true because these are some of the same folks who will later start plotting Jesus' death, right? And so these men, they see this man carrying his mat, and they say, "What are you doing? Don't you know it's unlawful to carry your mat on the Sabbath?" Well, Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest, and that's not resting, that's work, right? Some of you are like rolling your eyes. I don't know. Sometimes I do yoga, and, I might be carrying a mat with me. I don't really consider that a lot of work. It's a good question, right? Well, what is work and what isn't work is a matter of a lot of debate during this time period in these very formative days for Judaism, but also in, what comes to be Christianity. How do we deal with these? What should we do? The man says, "Well, look, this guy healed me, and he told me to carry my mat, so it's not my fault." And they're like, "What? Someone healed you? Where's that man?" Because that's work. Healing is work. You're not supposed to be healing on the Sabbath. It doesn't matter if it took Jesus just like a couple of seconds. It's work. So this guy does not know who Jesus is. Jesus didn't give him his business card or anything. He just healed him and went on his way. Told him to carry a mat, which got him in trouble. Sure. My mom taught me you always got to clean up after yourself, and maybe Jesus has the same thing in mind. We don't want anybody tripping over that mat. I don't know. But it gets this guy in trouble, nonetheless. So he goes to the temple later, the man who's been healed. This man who's had mobility issues for 38 years. He's there at the temple. What a big deal for him. He's encountering God in this place where God is supposed to be manifest. And Jesus comes across him and he says, "Hey, look, you're all better. Don't sin so worse things happen, okay?" Which is a weird statement, We're not totally sure, what Jesus is getting at here. Jesus, you don't think this man was sick for 38 years because he sins, do you? Or are you worried that, are you talking about eternity in mind? Or do you have, a judgment thing in mind? Or do you know something we don't know about this man? We're not told. The writer doesn't seem to care. And this is just something Jesus tends to say often in the book of John. Hey, better keep your nose clean, all right? We don't want bad things to happen. Keep your nose clean. So the man now knows who healed him. And he goes back to the authorities and he tells them, well, it was that Jesus guy. That Jesus guy? And so they end up confronting Jesus. How dare you heal on the Sabbath? And Jesus says, my Father, my parents, God is working all the time, and so am I. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, this version of Jesus does not go well with Matthew, the Gospel Matthew's version of Jesus, who's like, you need to do the law and also take care of folks and have good priorities and all of that. This version of Jesus is like, I'm working. Law or not, God's working, so I'm working. I'm just going to. It's okay. It's okay that these different stories have different complications for us. It's okay that they contradict, because they have different points they're trying to make. At least I think it's okay. I kind of find it exciting, to be honest. Shows us where a writer's really coming from, what they value. And now, the religious leaders are really mad. Because not only is Jesus a lawbreaker, these are the laws that govern their society. Not only is he breaking the rules, but he's also speaking of God in this incredibly familial way. And there's layers to what it means for Jesus to say Son of God. One, the most famous son of God during this time is Caesar. You'd even have that printed on coins. You know, son of God. That's why you got to give me money. I'm the son of God. You know, that's why you got to do what I say. I'm the son of God. So there's that. Also, this is very monarch language. That's not a great way to put it, but it's the language very common for monarchs. David was a son of God, and the kings of Israel and Judah were referred to as sons of God. It's a pretty normal, typical thing, especially in the Mesopotamian, like that area. You know, that area of the Middle East at the time. But there's another thing going on here, too. Jesus goes on to talk about him doing what God wants him to do, and God and him are kind of functioning together, like simultaneously. And he starts using this language that is very reminiscent of how the angel of the Lord is spoken of in the Hebrew Bible, where the angel of the Lord, a separate being from God, carries the divine name and accordingly is representing God. He's got the authority of God. He is, his words and his actions, you might as well consider them from God. And so we've got like an avatar, access point of the divine kind of thing happening, which is super interesting. This also seems to be what John means when he's talking about Jesus having the Spirit of God. You know, that's kind of what he gets at. And later on, I said this last week and the week before, but at the end of the book, when Jesus is sharing the Spirit with his followers, it's also that kind of idea for us. You know, you also are an access point for the divine. God is with you too. I find this to be wonderfully poetic and interesting. Confounding, too. Anyway, I digress. Forgive my tangent there. Now, one of the main things happening in this text, one of the main teaching points that John has, is we've got to have right priorities. These leaders are in conflict with this man, and they're in conflict with Jesus. Why? Because they care more about following the law, following the rules of their society, than they do this man's well-being. When they learn that he's been healed, they don't say, well, like, what were you sick with? And how long was it? And, oh my gosh, congratulations! Wow, 38 years, that's a long time. No, they are concerned with obedience to the rules. He's not obeying the rules. He's carrying a mat. He is a rule breaker. And that's their main issue with Jesus, too. And I think all of us who are consistently hearing this rhetoric about, like, if you break the law, you ought to be, like, punished harshly, I think we can learn from this text. I think this is a point that is not intuitive to us, and I wish it was. If someone has to steal food to eat, they are technically breaking the law. What happens if they don't? They die, right? If someone has to commit a misdemeanor offense by not having their papers lined up in order to come into this country or overstaying a visa, I don't think they should be assaulted and put in a concentration camp. People's well-being matters more than legality. And I know we can say, well, these are religious laws. Yeah, but for their day and age, in their world, in Jerusalem, it was just the rules. It was all the rules. And then there's another point that commentators and preachers often bring up with this text. And I found myself just like chafing with it. It kept reflecting on it over and over and reading this text over and over. And they make this point that they think another point John is trying to communicate is that this man who's been healed is also a cautionary tale. Like he's also the bad guy somehow in this text. Because he was not grateful to Jesus. He didn't say, "Thank you for healing me." And also, he doesn't start following Jesus after this. He doesn't witness on Jesus' behalf. He goes back to the leaders. I find myself so uncomfortable with this, especially since Jesus himself never condemns the man for any of this. He just says, "Keep your nose clean." That's it. Don't sin. Jesus tends to tell people not to sin. That's kind of his thing in the book of John, you know? So I get so uncomfortable with this idea that this man who couldn't walk or move around very easily for 38 years is just supposed to boldly defy the authorities of his day, people who can make his life absolutely miserable. I mean, he's had the ability to walk for minutes, and he goes to the temple, you know? One of my issues with this idea, as I was reflecting, is that we do this to people today as well. Folks who have been experiencing oppression or marginalization somehow. And we're like, this good thing that happened to you, you ought to just be grateful for that, I've had 38 years of trauma and pain. Yeah, but have you thanked God for, this great thing that happened? And, thanking God is good. I agree, but really? And then this expectation of the man to boldly witness and defy the authorities and stand up for what's right. If we're expecting this from the man in this text, I think it's far too easy for us to do that to one another and to our neighbors who are experiencing such of a pinch in life right now. I think I need to elaborate a little bit on this. There is someone who stands up to the authorities in this text. And it's Jesus. Jesus is the one who stands up to the authorities. Jesus does take heat for this. But Jesus heals this man because he has the power to heal this man. And then he stands up to the authorities because he has authority. He has power. He's using his power to challenge these misplaced priorities of theirs. And I think that's beautiful and wonderful. But when we start internalizing this other points of the man should have also, I worry that we do that to the folks around us right now. We say all right, I'm showing up at this protest. How come you, neighbor, are not at this protest? You who happen to speak Spanish as a second language, or maybe are from another country. Where are the people of color at this protest? There is a business on Instagram ran by a black man in Portland who was saying on Friday, "I'm going to run my business today in spite of the fact that all of these organizers are telling me I need to close down my business today. And you want to know why? Because I got to eat, and my family have got to eat." And meanwhile, we're pressuring folks to say, you know what, though? Can you take that financial hit? Because I'm taking that hit today? My favorite coffee shop down the street is not open, so you shouldn't be open either. Like we ought to be the authorities. on how people show up in this moment. And I think that's what's really bothering me here in this passage. Because we look at this text and we're telling this man in the story how he ought to be showing up in this moment. And it's just completely devoid of compassion, which is exactly the crime that Jesus is mad at the religious leaders about, right? Like, isn't that our biggest point of condemnation for these folks? They don't care about this man? I worry about us doing that today with one another, with our neighbors and our friends. We live in a moment where there is heavy potential cost for speaking up to our authorities. Agents of the federal government and politicians and even religious leaders, we can't just assume that we get the freedom to express our frustration with them without repercussions. And so I get why some of us may not want to speak up. According to USA Today, in an article that came out last week, we now have more than twice as many people in concentration camps in our country than Germany did in 1939, 6 years into the Nazi regime. Back then, they had between 35,000 and 36,000 people. We have between 73,000 and 75,000 people in concentration camps. 1 year into this administration, I have friends who are truly terrified to speak up right now because an aspect of their identity is in the crossfires of this government. And I hate that they're afraid. I get it, because I'm also afraid, and I have less risk than they do. But I hate the pressure that they are feeling to speak up, even while they know they're in the crosshairs. And I know some of you in this room or at home who may be watching this have felt that way too. And I just want to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you are torn between speaking up and being assaulted, potentially, and showing up and potentially being incarcerated. It's not the way it should be. It's not fair to you. And I'm sorry for the pressure that you may be feeling from would-be allies. Maybe not all of us get to speak up publicly right now. Our marginalized community members shouldn't have to risk their lives to speak truth to power in this moment. They shouldn't have to. And we shouldn't pressure them to do so. We have different risk factors. So this is my ask. Let us be gracious with one another. If we have any condemnation that needs to be declared, let it not be of vulnerable people in the crossfires of our government, but rather of powerful people with political, economic, and social reach being silent. Let us condemn a society that is making it so hard for people to live safely, not those who are at risk at this time. And let us not take for granted the people around us who are risking everything by speaking up. They are Christ in our midst, using the power they have as children of God. Let us encourage one another who are doing so when they get to do so. And perhaps let us consider how to offer them support and rest so they can keep on doing so. Let us encourage one another who are scared and showing up anyway, who are angry and choosing peace instead of assault. Love one another. Take care of one another. And be gracious.